Good evening. It ain't what a man don't know. Hi, Spirit. How you doing? Good to see you, sir. It ain't what a man don't know that makes him a fool. It's all the things he does know. It just ain't so. That was said by a guy named Josh Billings. He was a American humorist, the last part of the 19th century. And he was actually a contemporary of a guy named Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, who said something similar to that. He said, it's not that Americans don't know things, it's that they know so many things that aren't true. It's not true. So with that kind of as a little bit of background, I want to come back to that. But let me thank you all for being here, and thank David and the North County Republicans for their hospitality tonight and allowing me to be here. It's a great privilege to be here. I thank you very, very much. There's I see a lot of familiar faces and old friends and people that have been a part of the Institute of the Constitution, and some new folks as well. So I'm grateful to be here with you. Here's what I'd like to do tonight. And let me start with a disclaimer. I'm probably not going to tell you anything to make that you don't already know. You probably know everything I'm going to tell you about. What I'm hoping to do in just a few minutes, and David said I have about 20 minutes or so, and I'll take some questions. What I hope to do is maybe try to introduce some ideas that might help you organize your thinking about some of the things that we deal with all the time. I'm probably not going to introduce any brand new, spanking new thoughts to you, okay? But here's what I'd like to do. I would like to talk for a few minutes about the standards by which we judge what things are lawful and not lawful. I'd like to talk about the standard that we use. And then I'd like to challenge you about some of the ways that you think about what things are good and what things are bad, what things are helpful, what things are not, and whether or not you're using a proper standard. So and then after kind of laying that background of which is kind of philosophical in nature, then I'd like to make the application of that to the county council, which is my current job. I spent 27 years as a lawyer, and you know, we started right off. David started right off calling me names. His very first thing he said was that I was a lawyer. but I spent 27 years with my brother in a wonderful partnership with my brother, one of the most honest and decent and brilliant men that I've ever met. And now I'm retired from that, and I've got this whole new career as a county councilman. I couldn't ask for a greater blessing from the Lord than to have this whole new set of circumstances, a whole new set of ideas and challenges that have come before me. And we'll talk a little bit about the budget tonight, David. And man, there's a massive amount of data that we've had to, that as a new councilman, I've had to try to get my arms around. And it's been a real challenge. So I hope to talk a little bit about political philosophy, and then make the application to the county council, and then take any of your questions. We can talk about the budget, talk about what's been going on. Okay. So here's what I'd like to. Here's how I'd maybe like to begin. David mentioned what our website was called the American View, and we basically take the American view, and it's very simply stated. We find it in the Declaration of Independence. And briefly stated, it presupposes certain things. Our political philosophy in America is based on a belief system. It's based on a belief, it's based on a creed. G.K. Chesterton said America might be the only country that ever self-consciously based its political system on a creed, on a system of beliefs. And it basically, you can sum it up by saying there is a creator God. That's what it's called for. That's what it says in our Declaration of Independence. Our rights, indeed all law, come from him. And the purpose of civil government is to protect and defend those rights. What rights? Those God-given rights that they just talked about in the previous couple of sentences, right? So that's basically what we call the American view. We usually have a poster. If I had a PowerPoint up here, I'd be showing you the American view. There is a God. Our rights come from him. The purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights. Now, when you say that, it's very simple, straightforward, but you have to remember that the purpose of government is to protect God-given rights. It's not to redistribute wealth, for example. It's not to take from one and give to another, even if one really has it and one really needs it. It's not to take from one and give to another. That's redistribution of wealth. That's a philosophy of government it's not American. It's not American. It's not biblical. It's not based on moral law. So let me just make the case for what the standard is for American law and government. If let's just say John and I are having an argument, having a discussion about how wide this podium is, okay? John says that this is 30 inches long, and I said, no, it's not more than 27 inches long. And we're going to ask David to actually be our judge. He's going to judge between us on this matter, right? What does David need to bring with him in order to be the judge? Thank you. He needs a ruler. He needs a tape measure. He needs a fixed standard. See, because our argument isn't just about, well, it's kind of long or kind of short. He needs a standard because we're arguing about how long it is. There's no way to know how long it is without relying and referencing a fixed standard. Well, I'm going to make the point to you that the same is true in law and government. There is a standard for determining what is law and what is not law. As a matter of fact, go back to our Declaration for a minute. Our founders were very much complaining. If you read the Declaration, about 2/3 of the document, maybe 4/5 of the document, is a list of complaints. It's a list of grievances against the king and against Parliament. And you know what they were arguing about things like the Stamp Act and the Townsend Acts and what they called the Intolerable Acts. And you know what they called those? They didn't call them law. You know what they called them in the Declaration? They called those kinds of things pretended legislation, which I think is a really good term we should remember, because I think we could apply it to things like Obamacare, Roe v. Wade. Those things aren't law. They're pretended legislation. In the case of Roe v. Wade, it's a pretended. It's not even legislation. It's a court opinion. But the point I want to make with you is that in our system of law and government, the ultimate law book, the ultimate standard for what's right and wrong, is God's Word. Now, what I'm just saying right now, by the way, is not a violation of the Establishment Clause. I'm not mixing church and state. What I'm saying is that there is a standard. God's Word is the ultimate standard. If you read all the founding documents of America, you will find this. You will find that this is the philosophy of American government. It's based on this belief system. There are other belief systems, but our American government is based on this belief system. So I'm holding the ruler to say that this is the standard. As a matter of fact, I can rearrange the furniture just a little bit here. Do this for a second. Because I want to place this kind of in the middle. I want to call this the middle of the room for our purposes. And I'm going to say, here is the standard. That's the eternal standard. It's why even if the county council voted 4-3, there's 7 of us, if we voted 4-3, that say everybody with the initials DZ are going to be shot at dunk, sir. Even if we voted 4-3 as a majority to say that, that's still not law. And you know it's not law, but do you know why? Because it violates the standard. It violates Exodus 20:13, which says, "Thou shalt not murder." We don't have, in other words, the county council, or even if we're the Maryland General Assembly, or even if we're the Congress of the United States, or some stupid world court, we don't have the authority to do that because there's a higher moral authority. So again, I'm putting this in the middle of the room. This is the ultimate foundational standard of American law and government, right? Now, it's not the only standard. That's an eternal standard, but there are a few temporal standards we have to keep in mind. And as soon as I find it, I'm going to hold up the U.S. Constitution. Well, you know what? I left this in my briefcase, but this book right here contains both the U.S. Constitution and the Maryland Constitution. They are both standards that we could put the ruler in this book as well and say that this is, thank you very much. I must have left it in the briefcase. Okay, so there's actually 3 more man-made standards that as a county councilman, I have to abide by. I've taken an oath to this standard. It's the United States Constitution. Now this eternal standard says what God says civil government can do and can't do. This standard is made by men, and it says what we have said that our government can do and not do. And then there's a state constitution that says what we can do, what our government is allowed to do and not to do. And then in Anne Arundel County, we have a county charter that I also take an oath to protect and defend. And so I can't violate any of these things. All of these things, 1 eternal, 3 temporal, if you will, man-made. These are the standards by which we determine whether something is really lawful or whether it's just, what did our founders call it? Pretended legislation, right? Now, we sometimes they foist pretended legislation upon us, and we need to resist it. It's actually our duty to resist it. But we can't resist it unless we know what it is, can we? We need to be, so that's why we need to know every one of these documents. If you're going to determine what's law and what's pretended legislation, you need to know the standard. You need to have the ruler. It needs to be actually internalized. The part of being an American is knowing these standards and applying them to what comes down, or what is purported to be legislation or lawful. So we need to know the standard, right? Okay, now, why is this? I want to try to make another point. Let me say that one of the things I'm hoping I can do for you tonight. This is a Republican club. Right? I would like to get you to stop being a Republican and start being a Republican. You with me? I would like you to stop being a Republican and to start being a Republican. Because the allegiance, as a matter of fact, let me tell you that I'm wearing 2 lapel pins. This is the 10 Commandments, and by that I'm really encompassing the moral law, the higher moral law. And over here on this lapel, I've got a Republican Anne Arundel County pin. Okay, so the question is, where is my allegiance? Well, sometimes the allegiance can overlap. Sometimes you can have a Republican who espouses and lives by Republican principles. But what I'm suggesting to you is that following the capital R is not following the standard. Republican principles are what the standard is about. Recognizing that there's a higher moral law that's in play, so we can't just shoot everybody with a DZ.
Thank you.
Initials. By the way, he's protected by the higher moral law, Exodus 20:13. He's protected by the 5th Amendment that says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Right? So he's protected in this, even if 90% of us voted that we should shoot him. We can't shoot him because we don't have the authority, because our culture has inculcated and understood these standards. But if we jettison these standards or forget them, then atrocities like that happen. So that's why we need to remember and inculcate these standards into everything. And that way we see what's valid, we see what's invalid, we see what's really lawful, and we see what's pretended legislation. And we see what's Republican and what's Republican. Let me, I'm gonna try to get you in the next couple minutes to stop using this word. It's going to be hard, because you're used to using this word, but let me show you why. I'm not really trying to get you to stop using the word, but I'm trying to make a point that the words mean something. Here's why. Look, ma'am, what's your name?
Maxine.
Maxine, would you stand up here and help me with something? Would you reluctantly come forward? Thank you. Now, Maxine is going to be your liberal. Okay? This is not typecasting, and I don't mean any offense to you. But I'd like you to stand right about here and face them. Okay? And now, please notice that here's the standard, both the biblical and the constitutional, legal, the lawful standard now you see she's to the left of it. She's on your left, right? Because she's a liberal, progressive, whatever you want, she's a secular, progressive, liberal, dare I say Democrat. Whatever. But see, okay. But she is taking a position to the left here. She is proposing an unconstitutional, immoral health care program. It has no basis in that standard, right? She's proposed that. Now, I am going to represent the Republican conservative standard, okay? Now, she introduces this left-wing, unlawful, immoral health care program. As the Republican, here's what I say, right? I'm going to ask you. Do I say, no, 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 that violates the Bible, the biblical standard, and it violates the Constitution? So that's, or do I do this? Here's my unlawful, immoral, unconstitutional health care program. That's obviously to the right of her, but it's to the left of the standard. You see what I'm saying? Isn't this what happens? And then we have a fight. And by the way, people like this, people get mad at me when I'm going to say what I'm about to say here. People like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, thank you, and Mark Levin and other, the kind of conservative commentators concentrate on this fight right here. Oh, you know, this is the big fight. We don't talk about that. Yeah. We talk about this. And then there's we agree to some compromise that's between here, right? Here's the thesis, she's the antithesis, and then we come to some kind of synthesis. Anybody familiar with the Hegelian dialectic? Ever heard of the Hegelian dialectic? Well, that's what's in play right here. Okay, this is an example of it. Now, next session of the legislature, which way does she move?
Further to the left.
She proposes something even more left-wing, even more unconstitutional, even more immoral. And what do I do? Do I go over here and say, I go over this way. Now, what does she do the next session? When there's when it's a gun grabbing bill or whatever, where does she go?
She's in the parking lot.
And where do I go? Okay? This is what conservatives do. And if you think about it, this is exactly what the word means. I'm conserving, I'm just like trying to put the brakes on her. I'm just trying to hold her back, right? But I'm not standing for the standard. What you're looking at here in my crude way, I'm trying to show you the progressive agenda. And conservatives are a part of the progressive agenda. So conservatives are liberal. Because notice where I'm standing right now compared to where she started. I'm left of left. And then this keeps going, right? This keeps going until it's... Thank you. Thank you. Toward the parking lot until we fall off, right? So that's why I'm going to suggest that in your thinking, I'm not going to slap your wrist if you ever use this word, but I'm trying to say that conservative, even the word itself, there's a train going this way, and if you're conservative, you're on the train and you're just running to the caboose. But the train's going this way. That's the conservative, liberal, red state, blue state. That's the rhetoric and that's the trap that we're in, which is why I'm here trying to say that the standards that we should always try to bring into play are biblical and constitutional. That's where the these are fixed standards. Conservative is not a fixed standard. It's not a ruler. It's a gooey, mushy thing, right? Conservative means it's just I'm just a little bit to the right of this left position. You see? So that's why I'm again, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm trying to give a little help to our thinking process. So what I want you to do is to stop having loyalty just to a man or a group of people who are Republican, capital R. Because they're very possibly, you have to discern whether they're part of this progressive agenda or whether they're standing for the standard, the American philosophy of government. Right? This is the standard. This is what we need to stand on. This is lawful. Okay? Now, with just a couple of minutes that I might have left, let me say that what I've tried to do in the county council so far is to enact this way of thinking, at least in my own, with respect to my own actions and my own explanations of my actions. And what I've done, we have a website called PeroutkaTownHall.com, Peroutka Town Hall. David mentioned that a lot of my past writings and commentaries you can find on theamericanview.com. Now that I'm a councilman, I have to separate those things because, but you're still free to go there. I mean, I still have free speech even though I'm a councilman. But the American View is where you'll find a lot of my past writings. But Peroutka Town Hall is where I have attempted to create a template. And Neil, I'm going to ask Neil to pass these. If you can pass these out, Neil, I'm going to pass something out to you right now. And this is my attempt in the my county council job to apply what I've just told you about. Okay? And what I've done is develop 10 questions, and there's an explanation of my thinking of how I've come to this. And then on the back of page 1 it says questions. And then I've actually developed 10 questions which I'm going to use as a template for every piece of legislation that comes before the council. And those 10 questions, let me read this the first, maybe I can read them all to you. You'll see them here. The first question is, does the legislation comport with the United States Constitution? So I'm asking this standard question. I'm saying, does it fit this ruling, right? Then I'm saying, number 2, does the legislation comport with the Maryland State Constitution? So I'm asking the question about every piece of legislation is, do we have the authority to do it in here? Not just, is it a good thing? Not just, we want to build a bike bridge right at, in my district, at the connect, the College Parkway, Ritchie Highway bike bridge, right. Now, you might say, well, that's a good idea or a bad idea, or that suits some people's needs, but some people will never use it, and it might be good, it might help this amount of people or not. But what we really ought to be asking is, do we have the authority to do that? Do we have the authority to do that from here? Do we have the authority to do that from here? Do we have the authority to do that from here? And is it a moral thing to do? We have people that want us to build a tennis center in Anne Arundel County. It's part of the budget process. They're part of one of the budget items. Do we want to build a tennis center? Well, the question really is not whether tennis is a really good thing or whether tennis will make you healthy or tennis will make a certain number of people healthy as versus other people. The real question is, do these standards give me the authority to take money out of David's pocket and pay for a tennis center? That's the real question. Do I have the authority? The very threshold question is, do I have the authority to do this thing? And where do I find it? Where do I get it? Okay? Does the legislation comport, I think I said question number 3 with the Anne Arundel County Charter. Number 4, is the legislation in accordance with biblical standards? In other words, do I have the moral right to do this? Okay? Does the legislation negatively impact citizens' rights? If yes, what are the implications on personal liberty, economic freedom, or personal property? But those questions are only asked after I know that I have the authority to do this thing, right? And then there's cost-benefit questions. Or excuse me, what date was, we asked some procedural questions here. In other words, was there sufficient time for this piece of legislation to be vetted, right? Are the terms of the legislation succinctly defined? Sometimes you get legislation that comes before you which is so unclear we don't really know what it means. A la Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass it to find out what's in it, right? So we want to know that the terms of the legislation are clear. Number 8, if the legislation requires a personnel appointment, and very few of them do, this only comes up, in other words, we're going to appoint somebody to something and give them a job and pay them for the public treasury, do those people understand this? Or are they part of this? Right? So in other words, are they qualified for the job? Number 9, if funds are being generated for this legislation, in other words, if we're taxing people, is there an opportunity to apportion the funds for intended purposes only? In other words, if we're going to collect money from taxes, are we going to use it for what we said we were going to use it for? Or is it just going to slush around somewhere and get spent somewhere, right? And then number 10, does the implementation of this legislation require the expenditure of taxpayer funds? And if yes, what's the impact from a cost-benefit analysis? So you only get to a cost-benefit analysis after you're convinced that you have the authority to do this thing in the first place. So so what I've done, and then the rest of this handout is actually taking those questions and applying it to one of the first bills that came before us, which was the workforce housing bill. And so I've given you an example here. What's on my website, which for this particular bill, I think it was 8214, which is how we applied these questions to that particular bill, and I did vote for that bill and why I voted for it. So what I'm trying to do with these 10 questions and with my constituents, I represent about 55,000 people in District 5. The whole, well, I guess I really represent the whole county. There's about, what is it, there's about 555,743 people.
Wow.
At least there was when I started the sentence. There's about 80,000 people in my district. I'm sorry, about 555,000. I think I said that wrong in the county. And what I'm trying to do is to be transparent and complete about what I'm doing as a councilman, why I'm voting for what I'm voting for, my thought process, etc. And I want to really start a dialogue with my constituents or with anybody who's willing to start a dialogue about, well, if you don't really like my 10 questions, that's okay. I did the best I could here. Give me your 10 questions. Give me your question. If you think I missed something, tell me what you think I ought to be asking. If you think one of my questions is ill-conceived, then tell me so. But I'm hoping to do that. Yes, ma'am.
What you just said we have to use in actual politics. Your 10 questions are fantastic, first of all, I have to say. But you put the question back to us. Tell me what's wrong with my question, okay? When people go to the lab, we have to act in the same kind of way. They give us a bill, and they say, we can tell them as small Republicans, okay? We can tell them, yes, you wrote it. Now prove to me that it's according to each other.
Right.
And throw the problem to them, not to have us go ahead and just try to figure it out ourselves without on the starter, without the starter. But you write the bill, you say it's good for the Americans, prove it. And this is how the small Republicans have to start acting, because what they do, the left does to us, they throw all the problems onto us and the accusations and the complaints and everything, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to justify that we were not wrong, instead of trying to work on an issue, to improve the American life.
Can I? I think you're right. I think you bring up a very interesting point. Because what we're trying to do here is clarify our thinking about these things. Trying to think right. I had a pastor one time that said, right action follows right thinking. I can't really act rightly until I think rightly. And part of the problem in thinking rightly, if I catch your drift, what you're saying is, we're bombarded with all this nonsense and all this white noise, if you will. It's not even white noise. We're bombarded with so many crazy proposals and crazy things that it's hard for us to even have the space to think straight and clearly. And I don't disagree.
A crisis, to keep us busy with the crisis and not be able to do anything else.
Right.
And that keeps us very behind in taking actions that are going to be good for the country, you know. Instead of working productively, we are trying to give answers to the Democrats every day and every day.
So they've got us. So they got the arrow pointed at us instead of.
Right. So we have to put the pressure back to them. Prove it. Prove what you say. Even an accusation. Prove your accusation.
Okay.
Instead of me trying to defend myself, you prove your accusation. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Throw
I do.
everything on them instead.
Mr. Neal.
Michael, I'd just like to add, I thought there'd be a stop and there'd be a question and answer. We moved rather rapidly into the question period.
Okay, well,
and I'd just like to say, if anybody feels the least uncomfortable with the tape running and they're talking all, I'll just turn it off.
Yeah, well, let's.
It's no problem.
I did want to go to a separated question and answer session. That was my idea. So I wanted to give him a chance to let's let him finish. And then I'd like to encourage everybody to develop their questions, and let's have concise questions and give him a chance to answer, okay? I think we're not here today to give our opinions on everything. We're here to hear what he has to say, and we're going to ask our questions of him. Okay, thank you. So we'll do that.
Sure.
When you're ready to quit, another 5 to 10 minutes, and then
Okay.
plenty of time for questions.
I'm really, and I think I've given you enough to think about here tonight already. I don't need to really, but let me just summarize by saying what I'm trying to introduce is that we're not lost. We don't have to be lost. There are standards to develop that we can understand that will help us to know what's lawful and legal and what's pretended legislation, what's fake, what's phony. But in order to do that, I want to go back, I'm going to end where I started. In order to do that, we have to know these things. These things have to be second nature. There was a time in our history in America where these were second nature for everybody. A biblical understanding of law and government, an understanding of the Constitution, not living, breathing Constitution that you know, an understanding of the words and the principles that underlie our Maryland Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, and in the case of Anne Arundel County, our county charter. There was a time when this was, there was a commonality of understanding among the people. We have lost that. We have lost that. And I don't see how we can really solve a lot of the detailed problems that we have until we make strides in regaining them. In other words, again, right action follows right thinking. Now, I'm just going to end very briefly with a commercial for Institute on the Constitution, fair warning. This is what we've been doing for the last 15 years, since about 1999, 2000. We have been developing curriculum so that we can recover this understanding of law and government, which is basically not taught in our government schools, and it's not taught and it's not encouraged in the media. So we need to look, and that is why we developed an Institute on the Constitution curriculum. And we have a course on the U.S. Constitution. We have a course on the Maryland Constitution. We actually have a course on the county charter on all 3 levels of government. We actually have a course on how to be a good juror, what jury duty is all about, and how you can, instead of avoiding jury duty and trying to get out of it, no, go there and do the job well. that's what we want to encourage. If you were, by the way, if you were falsely accused, you would really hope for a smart jury, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want a jury that was just led around by the prosecutor, right? You'd want a jury of your peers that was knowledgeable. So we owe that to our fellow man. So we have been about this business, and if you want to learn more about that, please go to theamericanreview.com. If you want to follow what we're doing with respect to the questions and analyzing legislation, please go to PeroutkaTownHall.com. And again, what I'm trying to do is get you to stop being a Republican and start being a Republican. Okay? God bless you. Thank you.
All right, so I know we've got a lot of questions, and so let's try to keep our questions brief. Let me start with a quick question. So you've given us this packet,
Right.
and this would be an example for our edification of a practical application.
Right.
Okay, very good.
That was one of the first bills that came before us, and yeah.
Okay. And
That's
so how you took your principles and applied it to the legislation.
Right, and also on the
Good.
website, David, what we've done is, we not only have printed that text on the website,
Okay.
but for most of them, if not all of them, I've recorded a little 3-minute video. So you actually get to see my ugly face explaining, explaining that verbally.
Okay. All right, thank you. Martin.
Yeah, coming back from the big picture universe you've been addressing down to more local things, based on your experience in the county council so far, or the council so far, do you think the fight for the repealing the rain tax is over?
No, I hope not. I hope not. Just to put some details in there, let me back up a couple steps and say that when I went door to door during my campaign, what I call front stoop wisdom of the people in Anne Arundel County was, we're taxed out. And some of there were sad stories and angry stories that I heard. And people really thought that the rain tax was the final straw, the last straw. Many people said they're going to leave Anne Arundel County. I heard people say, when my husband's tour duty is up, we're leaving. Or when my son gets out of high school, we're leaving. There was a lot of things like that. So I believe that the rain tax is not the right, is really building an empire. I mean, I could go into that in more detail some other time, but we try to introduce a bill that I promised that would be one of the things that we do, and I was able to do that the first couple of months. I helped to co-sponsor a bill to eliminate cold turkey, failing that to phase it out, failing that to reduce the fee by 35% or something. All of those failed 4-3. We had 3 Republicans that voted for that, and 1 Republican and 3 Democrats that voted against that. So your specific question is that over? It's kind of over for now, but I hope it's not over.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
this gentleman right here.
I'll bear witness to the Institute of the Constitution because, I mean, I've always been kind of a conservative or whatever you want to call it, if I'm not supposed to say that word, but, I wasn't real clear about it until I started hanging out with these guys, and now I'm pretty clear.
So do you have a question, sir?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
No, okay, that's enough.
You were sneaking up on the question.
Miller, do you have a question?
Yeah. First off, I hope I don't mind. I hope you don't mind, because when I go to the county council meetings, which I attend frequently, I try to use you as the example as to why you won your election to beat these other councilmen over the head with your example. So I hope you don't mind that. But I'm going to keep on doing it until I get through. Well, that's not the point. The point is trying to get through their thick heads, what's going on with the people in the county, because certain ones up there are just too stubborn that they don't understand it. But my question would be, on those 10 questions that you made up as to how you judge legislation. Have you talked to the other ones about those 10 questions and gave them some enlightenment about it?
To some extent. Yes, I've discussed them with, well, actually, I think I've discussed them with all my Republican colleagues. I haven't really discussed them with my Democratic colleagues. But it's not that I don't want to, or I just kind of haven't gotten there yet. One of the things about, first of all, let me say that my life on the council so far has been very, very collegial. People have been very gracious to me, both sides of the aisle. Very, very, very nice. And I'm pleasantly surprised that it's very friendly. There are people, I sit where I sit on the dais between two people that I could not be more philosophically different than. But my hope is that the reasonableness and the rightness of these arguments will prevail, not necessarily my beating anybody through their...
Yeah, because I mean, I've sat there and when there's certain times you vote against the grants and certain other legislation, and you're the only one voting against it.
There's a lot of 6-to-1 votes.
But right, exactly. That's the point. And I look at their faces, and they're like, why? You can see the look of disdain on their faces.
Well, maybe that's a good thing. I can't see their faces.
Well, yeah, we can, out there in the audience. But like I say, you can see that they don't understand what's going on because they just have that look of bewilderment.
Well, everything takes time.
Yeah.
And they were really puzzled the first time you abstained.
Yeah.
Tim?
So, Michael, to that lady's question, I think your template provides consistency, which no one else can do, and that in itself begins to illuminate process. So I know I intend, when I went in 18, to use your process. So switching to the question, Dave, because I know you're about...
No, you're good.
So, could you allude to the budget drama, I guess is the best way to call it, that's going on, and if you're willing to share where you're at or how you project that's going to unfold? Seems to be a lot of swirl right now.
Yeah, real briefly, because that's a very open-ended question, but real briefly, first of all, my impression of the county budget is that there's probably about, don't hold me to this percentage, I'm just kind of pulling this out of the air, there's probably 76% of it that's not authorized by the standard. A lot of what we do, we don't have the authority. In my view, a lot of it. So chipping away at that and working at that. I mean, I can't do it by myself. I'm one of 7. So what I need to do is to take the spots that I can take to try to articulate in the clearest possible way this or that particular. And let me just give you a quick example. This was in the news to some extent that there's a grants program that our county has that's administered by the county executive's office. I think there's about 35 grantees, and it's been going on for a while. I don't know when it started. I don't know the history of how it started in detail, but it's been there a while. And the county executive caught some negative flack because part of the grant program was given a grant to the American Red Cross and another grant to
The symphony is what you
the
call
symphony,
it.
right?
Baltimore Symphony
Right.
and
He's on the board.
So he caught flack, and as a matter of fact, he withdrew those from the grant program and redistributed the money. But my position on that was, what are we doing in the charity business at all?
Right.
Why are we getting? So I'm not singling out those 2 or 3 grants. My question is, if we're the civil government, we either have the responsibility to pay for a certain manner of type of thing, or we don't. Why do I have how could I get the authority to take money out of your pocket and give it to a charity? Let's leave the money in your pocket, and if you decide to give it to the charity, you should do it. So that's just an example of where the whole thing's wrong. So,
Well, if I may, Councilman, I think you just said something very critical too, in that you're chunking where you can, but you're not an all or nothing. And it seems in the social media, it's fascinating to see diehard conservatives lambast somebody, one person or another, and it's an all or nothing venture. Well, what's the alternative then if you just walk from that? So I applaud you for outlining how this is a process. And again, I think that goes a long way to educating folks.
Thanks, Tim. Well, appreciate it very much.
Right here?
Have some of these so-called charities been doing some service for the county, and that's why she was giving money to them?
There might be, because that argument was made. The argument was made about some of the charities.
Yeah, that's what I read.
If we didn't give the money to this charity didn't do it, we would have to do it as the county. Well, if you're going to make the argument that it's a county function, then let's do it that way. Let's fund it. Let's do it. In other words, let's have the debate and let's ask the question: is it a legitimate county function? Is it part of the ruler? Is it part of the standard? And if it is, then let's fund it. I just don't think that the county should be in the charity. I mean, it just seems like it's absolutely contra our role. It's another role, and charities should be funded by. Let's give the money where it's in the hands of its rightful owners.
Okay, Tim?
I wonder if you could just expound briefly on the legal argument that went on earlier this week about legislative days and not being legal to debate if you're reducing revenue, but if you had an overblown budget, it was okay to legislate to find revenue to balance the budget.
I'm not trying to duck that question, but the true answer is I really don't know. That is to say, what he's referring to is the county executive and my colleague, Mr. Fink from this district, came up with an idea that if in fact the property tax cut was not going to pass, the alternative was an income tax cut that was proposed. And then there was a procedural question about whether or not it could be, there was enough time for it to be published and whether it was proper. The county attorney came down on one side of that. The county auditor came down on another side of that. I really don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion because I didn't study. I read the county attorney's reasoning, but didn't study it in detail. Believe me, there was just a mass of things going on, and I guess it might seem like I'm ducking that question, but I just don't know. I didn't form my own legal opinion.
For a while, I thought everybody was just going to fold up their papers. What's legal to even talk about?
Well, where does it stand then, following up with Tim's question?
Well, I think we're going to find out tomorrow.
Okay.
Because here's where it stands. The chairman did not rule it out of order. Right. So it's still alive. But I'm not positive that it might not be ruled out. I don't know whether it might be ruled out of order on tomorrow.
So we don't get our 3%?
No.
It'll be a public hearing.
He didn't say that.
It'll be a public hearing. But the trouble is, to his point, it won't be a legislative day.
Let me take Ann's question back
I
here.
have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Michael, in reference to the Board of Education, as a taxpayer, and it's my money, I don't want any more going to the Board of Education. I'm tired of that. They constantly throw money at the problem. Okay? I'm tired of the Board of Education coming down and asking for more and more and more when the results of the high school diplomas, the kids graduating, the decline, I don't see production in some of those graduates. I'm tired of them coming down and expecting more and more and more from the taxpayer. It's my money. I don't want to go into the Board of Education anymore. How can we, as taxpayers, and I know County Council has a hard time of saying no to them. And, when Maxwell left, he left owing us money. Shame on him. We can't go get it. Well, that's my taxpaying money. I want it back in my county. Okay, I don't want to give the Board of Education anymore. How can we stop that? How can we ask them to open their books to us?
Well, here's there's going to need to be a sea change and some changes at the state level for that. Because one of our problems, and I think I'm not talking out of school here, the Board of Education is funded by the county council, or it's funded by, through the executive's budget, which is but we then don't have any audit or control over. In other words, we have to appropriate the money, but then there's really not really what I could consider to be an adequate control procedure. So it's a problem. It's a procedural, structural problem that has been going on for a long time, and there's an expert here that might have something to say.
I'm not an expert, but they consume over half of the budget, and I've been working with charter schools for 10 years. You can't just, an ordinary auditor would look at those books. They couldn't come up with any precise answers because they don't follow GAAP, which all companies have to do, or you risk going to jail. Yep. But government doesn't use GAAP whatsoever. You have, and you hit the newspaper, we got a $2 billion maintenance backlog. What do you mean maintenance backlog? What does that is? That means last year they put a big place in a Gazette that this school was built in 1970 with open classrooms, but this year we got them closed in. This is 45 years later. I said to the reporter, did anyone ask you what the hell it took 45 years to put up some drywall? And she said, no. They did a remodeling in the city of Annapolis. Remodeling cost $906 a square foot. We bought and remodeled a building in Laurel for $135 a square foot. Where does the $700,000?
Can I just summarize the problem? And is that there is a lack of accountability to the council and to the executive, which means there's a lack of accountability to the people, in my view. So, but it's a big problem. It's a big and not a new problem. I think there might have to be state legislation to change things.
And I'm going to preempt Tim for a second, and I think the elected school board issue, you're not even.
That's what I'm getting ready to talk about.
Is something that we big R Republicans have been trying to work on for years, so that the elected school board will hopefully be more accountable to the people, but that is under discussion year after year after year after year, and it gets voted down here in this county, where most counties in Maryland have an elected school board and Arundel County doesn't. So that's an issue that a number of us feel is continued is important. How do you feel about that?
I would be in favor of it.
Yeah, okay.
So if I...
yeah, and I know I want to take some other questions. I saw some hands raised. I want to take this gentleman's questions right here, please. And then we'll take this, and we'll take GK's next. Yours right there, sir.
You outlined a very convincing argument for standards. What does a high-level, aggressive plan to educate general Americans on those standards look like to you? Like a high-level list. How would you go about it?
Well, at the highest level of that, I would think that we need to follow the U.S. Constitution and get the federal government out of the education business. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution outlines the things that, basically, there's 18 things listed there that the Congress has the authority to spend your money for. And education is one of them. Health isn't one of them. Retirement isn't one of them. Pardon me?
And the EPA.
EPA isn't one of them either. I can't talk about that. But so, and I think what happens at the federal level is that because they can print money out of thin air, and we can't at a state or county level, but through the feds, there's an undue influence, I believe, of federal money into the states. That by means of grants, we agree to things because we want the cheese, but we get the shot, but we forget that, and then we just want the cheese. So we have to stop taking the cheese. I think let me just say that much. One leg of an overall strategy is to have the state, maybe by means of the governor having the fortitude to do this, is to say we're not connected with the Federal Department of Education anymore. We're consider them to be unconstitutional, and we don't want any of their money. We don't want any of their cheese, and so we're not going to institute their Common Cores and their No Child Left on Drugs. Okay, that's one part.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
How you doing, sir?
Very good. How are you? Thank you so much for standing for something. I called you up, as you remember, because I wanted to ask you my question in private, but since we didn't get a chance to meet, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask you this question. As a believer, as a strong Christian, that believes in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and as somebody that has the same standard that you've enumerated here tonight, then when I read your profile, when I didn't know, when I hadn't met you the first time, I read your profile, and it talked about, some organizations that you belong to that didn't like black people like me. And my question is, if I have the same standard you have, we have the same belief in the Lord and everything, and you do believe, if it's true that you do belong to those organizations that hates me, as a black person, how am I supposed to feel? You and I belonging to the same organization as a Republican, as a believer, and having the same standard. Can you explain that to me, please?
Sure. First of all, I believe, and I was asked this question way back when I ran for president, back when I was on the Washington Journal, and they asked me a question about my beliefs about race. My statement then, and my statement now, my statement always will be, there's only one race, and that's the human race. There's no difference between you and me except a degree of pigment. It's the same pigment, it's the same DNA. There's only one race, and that's the human race. It's always been my position. My membership in a group called the League of the South was mischaracterized, and the League of the South was mischaracterized by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a group of people that, it's hard for me to actually talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center because their favorite thing to do is to get people to hate each other by playing the race card. That's what they do. They play the race card to try to divide and conquer. The Southern Poverty Law Center, as far as I'm concerned, is the biggest racist group that possibly could be.
Yes.
They called me a racist.
They're dishonest. They're dishonest. They're very dishonest.
They're very dishonest. But they're so dishonest, the FBI has stopped using them. That should tell you something. But what I really believe was in play when I was attacked and called a racist, it was an oblique attack. See, because a lot of times when people really don't want you or your beliefs in the game, the attack is not direct. The attack was about this. That's what the attack about. The attack was not really about race. There were a couple of people, a couple of, you might call them journalists. I think that's giving them too high an honor. But there were a couple of people that wrote articles back and forth and quoted each other. It's like they were sitting in a cubicle next to each other. This guy writes an article saying Peroutka is a racist, or Peroutka is associated with racist groups, and this guy says Peroutka, and then it goes back, and this guy writes, and they quote each other, and it's the whole thing is just made up. So that's I could buy you a beer. We can talk more about it.
Sure, thank you. I truly appreciate it, because it's been. Thank you.
I'd like to break at 8:15, unless you're having a great time. We do have a club. I think you're having a good time. We do have some club business, and I have some announcements.
And I did have one short question, if I could try again.
Hold on a second, sir. Just a second. Did you have a question?
Very quickly.
Yes, John.
Sir, you talked about the Bible as a standard, which I certainly understand. The question is, do you find in all your experiences in using it as a standard that the Old Testament or the New Testament is more applicable, and within that, are there certain books that are more applicable as a standard?
Thank you. Briefly, the answer is no. I consider that the complete Bible is the whole counsel of God. And I don't believe that the New Testament obliterates or changes the Old Testament. No, I believe that that the whole counsel of God is what we need to consider, and that Scripture explains Scripture.
This gentleman in the gray back here, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Come on, Steve.
I was kind of rambling before. You know, I mean, it should be known that the state constitution has to be subordinate to the U.S. Constitution, you know. But how did the progressives act when you try to tell them that both of those have to be subordinate to the Bible? How did they react to that?
Well, see, that's very interesting. Thank you. That is like explaining the law of gravity. We used to understand it. Somehow we've been dumbed out of it. But there was a time in America when you didn't have to explain that. Everybody understood that.
Well, the president said we are no longer a Christian nation. That's what he said when he first, and when he said that, that was it for me, you know. But I mean, so that's kind of the progressive attitude. So how do they? I mean, it's hard.
Well, to answer your question, it varies. It's all over the board. For some people, it's a very welcome thing to hear. To some people, it's no hable anglaise. To some people, it's glazed over. To some people, you're a bug-eyed whack job if you're actually talking about the fact that Almighty God is the source of law and government, capital S. Right? But there was a time in our culture when that was understood, and I'm suggesting that is the reinculcation of that is what. And again, when I'm saying these things that I'm saying, this is not a violation of the Establishment Clause. What you've come to understand is separation of church and state. Because we're not talking about the church. I'm talking about God and government.
That's not a constitution or anything anyway.
Oh no, right. Some of the churches say, of course, you know, like everybody in this room knows that the word separation, the word church, the word state is not in the First Amendment. The word of is there 5 times.
Why did they make you swear on the Bible? You know, I mean,
So we have one more question. Spear.
I just want to ask Mr. Peroutka, does he have any say in the school board and the maintenance of ethics? And in other words, they usurped the local county executive and county council. Really having any say in the school board?
Does everybody know what maintenance of effort is?
Yeah. I don't think everybody.
It's a state law that says that whatever funding level we gave the schools last year, this might be simplistic. Whatever funding level we did divided by the number of students, there's a per student funding level. This year we have to fund at least at that level. Next year we have to fund at least at that level. We have to maintain. It's called MOE, maintenance of effort. So we don't have a choice. We have to do it, and the state says we have to do it. There are a couple of questions raised there. Number one, do we have to listen to the state? What's the consequence if we don't? We don't get their grants. We don't get whatever. But should we? I mean, I just think it outside the box. But do we have to listen to the state? Another question is, can we get our Sid Sobs and our local representatives here to help us to change that at the state level? Because that's, I actually think to some extent it hurts the school system, because there's an attitude of, okay, we got to give you the maintenance of effort? Okay. I'm not saying that's my attitude, but I'm saying to some extent there is that attitude of like, okay, you guys, you went to the big boss and we got to give, mom says we got to give you this, we'll give you this, that's it. You know, so I think it might be, I don't think it's really the way to run it.
I want to give Steve Poland a chance. I think I missed you.
No, I was just trying to get you to recognize the gentleman.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And maybe the last question, if I might. Oh, you got a question. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I believe in everything you said. In fact, I was talking today about how the young people today don't know about our government. I said when I went to school, we learned geography, we learned history, we learned civics. There were 3 separate classes. Now it's thrown together in one period called social studies. And unfortunately, when it comes to our foundation of our country, our laws, how our laws come about, Kids today, I'm sorry, are basically dumb compared to what we know. They're not getting the information. But how can we get our country back to the standards that you want? Because the idea is we elect officials, even the ones in Congress, in the hopes that, you know, they're talking a good story. You know what I mean? But when they get there, they just go along with the status quo.
I have to say, thank you for that observation. How do we get it back? I think we have to have alternatives to the compulsory education in government schools. Government schools are designed to, and have been always been, I'm going to say something that's going to sound radical. If you go back, can I just have 3 minutes?
Go right, go ahead.
I'm going to get ready to open, you just opened up a can of worms. But let me just open it and just speak about it briefly. We didn't always have compulsory education in what they're now called public schools. I call them government schools. We had common schools in New England back in the early 1800s. They were run and they were organized, and the curriculum was, and the teachers were hired. The curriculum was determined by parents, by the community. Now we have states, and now we have this federal influence I talked about before. We have the government, the civil government, running education. In this Constitution, the Maryland Constitution, Article 43 of our Declaration of Rights, actually says that monopolies are odious. It actually uses the term odious in the Constitution. It says that they are not to be suffered. Well, if you take the government school system and you combine it with compulsory education, you must go there, or you must have a hall pass not to go there. When you do that, you have created a monopoly. Monopolies are, by law, by our Maryland State Constitution, odious things. What we need to do one of the big things to do to break this, and this is the leg to it, this tool that we were talking about, is we have to do things to break the monopoly of government schools. So that parents have an opportunity to teach children a different way than having Common Core shoved down their throat, or having those social studies programs shoved down their throat, that are all based on a standard. Believe me, there's nothing neutral about any education. Any education is always taught from a worldview, from a belief system. The government school system is the same way. It's taught from a belief system, except it's not this one. This one you can't talk about in government schools. So if this is the fundamental principle of American law and government, you have government schools teaching against that. That's a huge problem. One of the things that I'm going to try to be committed to in my tenure, to the extent that I can, is to help to try to break the monopoly of government schools.
Michael, and two important pieces of that equation are the education consulting industry, right? They're the ones the education consultants are the ones who benefit the most from government money, because they're constantly paid to redo curriculum, bring in new ideas, often, failing ideas, and of course the teachers union. So those are two very big entrenched pieces of government school system. I'm a homeschooler myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry about the can of worms, but
no,
thank you. Yes, and I'm a homeschooler.
Obviously, you've said a lot of things here that people have enjoyed.
I'm a homeschooler too.
Let's give Mr. Peroutka. Thank you
very, very, very much. It's a privilege to be with you.
We'll take a break now.